Love and the Time Story. Welcome to the story of love and the time story. This is a tale about the power of love and how time can shape our relationships and understanding of each other. This is a perfect way to practice your English listening skills. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our video on love and the time story. Today, we will learn about the powerful connection between love and time and how both shape our lives in unexpected ways. This story teaches us an important lesson about patience, understanding, and the value of relationships. So, are you ready to learn the full story of love and the time story? Let's watch together. Chapter 1. The Old Bookstore. In the small, quiet town of Havenwood, there was a charming bookstore called Pages of Yesterday. The bookstore sat on a little street corner, surrounded by tall trees and flower pots. Inside the store, the wooden shelves reached up to the ceiling. Each shelf was filled with books of every size and color. The air smelled like old paper and leather, and a big grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner. Sunlight came through the window, making the dust in the air look like tiny stars. Alara worked at the bookstore. She was a kind young woman, just 20 years old. Alara loved books and spent hours reading stories about faraway lands and magical adventures. She often wore a soft, comfortable sweater and kept her brown hair in a neat braid. Her kind blue eyes sparkled whenever she talked about books. The bookstore belonged to Mr. Abernathy, an old man with a gentle smile. His face was full of wrinkles, and his gray hair made him look wise. He loved the bookstore and treated every book like a treasure. Mr. Abernathy was kind to Alara and often told her stories about the store's history. One quiet afternoon, Alara was cleaning a dusty bookshelf in the back corner of the store. She moved books one by one, wiping the shelves carefully. Suddenly, she noticed something strange. Behind the bookshelf was a small door. What is this? Alara wondered. She reached out and opened the door. Inside, she found a hidden compartment. Sitting inside the compartment was a beautiful old clock. The clock was made of shiny brass and had tiny, intricate gears that seemed to glow softly. In the center of the clock was a strange, glowing crystal. It sparkled like a star. Alara picked up the clock. It was warm in her hands, and she felt a gentle breeze, even though the room was still. She also heard soft whispers, like someone was telling her a secret. She held the clock close and stared at it. "This is so strange," she said softly. Just then, Mr. Abernathy came over. He saw the clock and smiled. "Ah," he said, "so you found it." "Found what?" Alara asked, looking at him curiously. "That," Mr. Abernathy said, pointing to the clock, "is no ordinary clock. It has a story of its own, but its magic only works for those with a kind heart and a curious mind." Alara looked at the clock again. "Magic? What do you mean?" Mr. Abernathy just smiled. "You'll see," he said. Alara didn't understand, but she felt something special about the clock. She placed it on the counter and watched the gears turn slowly. The glowing crystal seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat. As the afternoon went on, Alara couldn't stop thinking about the clock. She wanted to know its secrets. Could it really be magical? Little did she know, this old clock would change her life forever. Chapter 2. The Enigmatic Clock. Alara carried the old clock carefully to her small apartment. Her apartment was cozy and quiet, filled with her favorite things. There was a soft, comfortable chair near the window and a small desk covered with books and papers. Outside the window, a tiny garden with colorful flowers made the view peaceful. She placed the clock gently on her desk. The crystal in the center seemed to glow faintly, catching the light. Alara sat in her chair and looked at the clock closely. "It's so beautiful," she whispered to herself. She ran her fingers over the smooth brass surface. The gears inside the clock turned slowly, making a soft ticking sound. As she touched the crystal, it began to glow brighter. Suddenly, Alara heard a soft voice. "Hello, Alara," the voice said. Alara jumped in surprise. She looked around the room, but no one was there. "Who's there?" she asked nervously. "It's me," the voice replied, gentle and kind. "I am Whisper. I live inside the clock." Alara stared at the clock. You can talk?" "Yes," Whisper said. "I am here to help you. This clock is special, and so are you." Alara didn't know what to say. She had never heard a clock talk before. "What do you mean? How is this clock special?" Whisper's voice grew softer. "This clock is not like other clocks. It can do more than show time. It can take you through time into the past or the future, but only if your heart is ready." Alara leaned closer to the clock. "Through time? That's impossible." "It may seem impossible," Whisper said, "but it's true. This clock has a long history. It has traveled with many people, and now it has chosen you." Alara felt her heart race. She looked at the glowing crystal. "How does it work?" she asked. Whisper spoke slowly, as if sharing a secret. "Touch the crystal and close your eyes. Think about a time that is special to you. It could be a memory or a dream of the future. When you are ready, the clock will guide you." Alara hesitated. "Why me? Why did the clock choose me?" "You have a kind heart, Alara," Whisper said, "and you are curious. The clock can only work for someone like you, someone who believes in love and possibilities." Alara smiled a little. She didn't fully understand, but she felt a strange warmth inside her. "What is your story, Whisper?" she asked. Whisper paused for a moment before answering. "I have been inside this clock for a very long time. I have seen many stories of love and courage. People have used this clock to find lost moments and to create new ones, but I cannot leave the clock. My job is to guide those who carry it." Alara thought about what Whisper said. She felt a mix of excitement and fear. The idea of traveling through time was both magical and mysterious. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "That's okay," Whisper said gently. "The clock will wait for you. Take your time to understand its magic." Alara nodded. She spent the rest of the evening examining the clock. She turned the tiny key on its side and watched the gears move. She noticed small symbols carved into the brass, like stars and hearts. Every detail made the clock more mysterious. Before going to bed, Alara touched the crystal again. It glowed softly, and Whisper's voice returned. "Good night, Alara. Remember, the clock's magic begins with you." Alara smiled as she climbed into bed. She looked at the clock one last time before closing her eyes. "Good night, Whisper," she said softly. As she drifted to sleep, she dreamed of glowing crystals, ticking gears, and journeys through time. She didn't know where the clock would take her, but she felt ready to discover its secrets. Chapter 3. The First Journey. Alara sat in her apartment, holding the strange clock in her hands. The crystal in the center glowed softly, filling the room with a warm, golden light. Outside the window, the garden seemed different. The sky was a soft violet color, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Whisper spoke again, its voice calm and kind. "Alara, the clock is ready. But before we begin, you must focus your strongest wish. What is the one thing your heart wants most?" Alara thought for a moment. She closed her eyes and held the clock close. Her mind filled with memories of her grandmother. "I wish to see my grandmother," Alara whispered. She passed away when I was a child. I miss her so much. Whisper's voice became softer. Touch the crystal, Alara. Think of her. Picture a moment when she was happiest. Alara placed her hand on the glowing crystal. She closed her eyes tightly and thought of her grandmother's garden. She remembered the smell of roses, the sound of birds singing, and the warm sun on her face. Suddenly, Alara felt a rush of wind around her. It was as if the room had disappeared. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in her apartment. She was standing in a garden. The garden was beautiful, filled with colorful flowers and tall trees. The air smelled sweet, like roses and lavender. The sunlight was warm, and the sky was a bright blue. Alara looked around, her heart beating fast. "Where am I?" she whispered. "This is your grandmother's garden," Whisper said gently. "You have traveled back in time." Alara's eyes widened. She turned and saw a young woman kneeling in the garden, planting flowers. The woman had kind eyes and a soft smile. She wore a simple dress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the sun. Alara gasped. "Is that my grandmother?" "Yes," Whisper replied. "This is her, many years ago." "Go to her, Alara." Alara hesitated. She took a deep breath and walked toward the woman. "Excuse me," she said softly. The young woman looked up and smiled. "Hello there. Can I help you?" Alara felt tears in her eyes. Are you Rose?" The woman laughed. "Yes, I'm Rose. How do you know my name?" Alara smiled through her tears. "I've heard stories about you. Your garden is beautiful." Rose blushed and brushed her hands on her apron. "Thank you. I love taking care of my flowers. They make me happy." Alara sat down on the grass beside her grandmother. "Can I help you?" "Of course," Rose said, handing Alara a small trowel. "We're planting roses today. They're my favorite." As they worked together, Alara asked questions about the garden and her grandmother's life. "You're so kind," Alara said softly. "You remind me of someone very special." Rose told her stories about growing up, her dreams of traveling, and her love of nature. "You're so kind," Alara said softly. "You remind me of someone very special." Rose smiled and touched Alara's hand. "That's sweet of you to say. Kindness is important. It's something my mother always taught me." As the sun began to set, the garden glowed with golden light. Alara felt a deep sense of peace. She had learned so much about her grandmother, things she had never known before. "It's getting late," Rose said. "You should head home before it gets dark." Alara nodded, her heart full of love and gratitude. "Thank you, Rose. This has been a wonderful day." As she stood to leave, Rose looked at her curiously. "You seem familiar. Have we met before?" Alara smiled. "Maybe in another time." She walked back to the spot where she had first appeared. Whisper's voice returned. "Are you ready to go back, Alara?" "Yes," Alara said softly. "But I'll never forget this moment." She touched the crystal again and closed her eyes. The wind swirled around her, and when she opened her eyes, she was back in her apartment. The garden outside her window looked normal again, but Alara felt changed. She held the clock close to her heart. "Thank you, Whisper," she said. "You were brave, Alara," Whisper replied. "Love is a powerful force, and it connects us through time." Alara smiled as she placed the clock gently on her desk. She looked out the window, her mind filled with memories of her grandmother. She knew she had just begun a journey full of love and discovery. Chapter 4: The Lost Love. Alara sat on the soft chair in her apartment, holding the magical clock. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the glowing crystal in its center. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. "Whisper," she said softly. I just saw my grandmother. It felt so real. It was real, Whisper replied, its voice calm and gentle. The clock allows you to travel through time, to moments where love has left its mark. Alara leaned back, her mind full of questions. How does it work? Can I go anywhere? To any time? Whisper's crystal glowed faintly as it spoke. The clock is special, Alara. It doesn't take you to just any time. It leads you to moments tied to love that is strong, love that is lost, or love that needs to be remembered. Alara's eyes widened with curiosity. So, it's a clock of love? In a way, yes, Whisper said. The clock was created long ago to help people reconnect with love across time. It could be the love of a family, a friend, or something even deeper. But there are rules. Rules? Alara asked, tilting her head. Yes, Whisper continued. You must focus on your heart's strongest desire. That is how the clock knows where to take you. But you cannot change the past. You are only a visitor, a witness to the moments that shaped love. Alara nodded slowly. I understand. It's not about fixing the past. It's about learning from it. Whisper's glow brightened slightly, as if pleased. You are wise, Alara. Not everyone understands that so quickly. Alara stared at the clock, tracing its intricate gears with her fingers. What about you, Whisper? Where do you come from? Why are you part of the clock? For a moment, Whisper was silent. Then its voice returned, softer this time. I was once like you, a person with dreams and feelings, but love changed me. I loved deeply, so deeply that I became bound to this clock. Alara's heart ached at the sadness in Whisper's voice. What happened? I loved someone across time, Whisper said, the crystal glowing softly, but we could never truly be together. My love was lost, and my heart was tied to the magic of this clock. Now, I guide others who seek love, helping them find answers or comfort. Alara felt a deep connection to the clock and the voice within it. That's so sad, she whispered, but also beautiful. You've turned your loss into something meaningful. Whisper's glow shimmered warmly. Thank you, Alara. It means a lot to hear that. Alara leaned forward, her mind racing. So, this clock isn't just a tool. It's a gift. It helps people understand the power of love. Yes, Whisper replied, and it helps people find peace, even in moments of loss. Alara sat quietly for a moment, thinking about her own life. She thought of her grandmother, of the garden, and of the warm feeling she had experienced earlier. Whisper, she said softly, I think I want to explore more. There are so many stories, so many people whose love shaped their lives. I want to learn about them. The crystal glowed brightly, filling the room with a golden light. Then you must trust the clock, Alara. It will guide you where you need to go. Alara smiled, holding the clock close to her heart. Thank you, Whisper. I think this is just the beginning of a beautiful journey. As the evening turned to night, Alara placed the clock gently on her desk. She looked out the window at the quiet garden below, her heart full of curiosity and wonder. She knew the clock held many secrets, and she was ready to uncover them one story of love at a time. Chapter 5. The Artist's Muse. Alara held the clock tightly, her fingers brushing the glowing crystal. Whisper's voice was soft but clear. This time, you will go to Paris, it said. The year is 923. The city is alive with art, music, and dreams. Someone there needs your help. Alara closed her eyes, focusing on the words. When she opened them, she was standing on a bustling street in Paris. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses from nearby cafes. Artists were painting on the sidewalks, their colorful canvases propped on easels. Writers sat at small tables, scribbling furiously in notebooks. She looked around, amazed at the lively scene. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "You are in Montmartre," Whisper explained. "It is a place where artists come to dream and create. But one artist here is struggling. You must find him." Alara wandered through the street until she saw a young man sitting on a wooden stool. His dark hair fell into his eyes as he stared at a blank canvas. Brushes and paints were scattered around him, but he didn't seem to notice. "Are you Julian?" Alara asked gently. The man looked up, startled. "Yes, I am Julian. But who are you?" "I'm Alara," she said with a kind smile. "You look like you need someone to talk to." Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm a painter, but I can't seem to paint anymore. My heart isn't in it." Alara sat on the edge of the fountain near him. "Why not? What's stopping you?" Julian hesitated, then spoke. "There is a woman, Anya. She is a dancer, graceful and full of life. She is my muse. I love her, but I can't tell her how I feel. She is going to marry a rich man, someone who can give her everything I cannot." Alara listened carefully. She could see the pain in Julian's eyes. "Have you told her how you feel?" she asked. "No," Julian admitted. "Why would she choose me? I have nothing to offer but my art, and even that has left me." Alara looked at the clock in her hands. The crystal glowed softly, as if encouraging her. "Sometimes, people need to hear the truth," Alara said, "even if it's hard. Love is worth the risk." Julian shook his head. "What if she laughs at me? What if I lose her as a friend?" Alara leaned forward. "What if she feels the same way, Julian? You'll never know unless you tell her." Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and picked up a brush. "Maybe you're right. But first, I need to paint. I need to show her how I see her, through my art." Alara watched as Julian began to paint. His hands moved quickly, and the blank canvas transformed into a beautiful image of a dancer in motion. The colors were vibrant, full of life and emotion. "That's amazing," Alara said, her voice full of awe. Julian smiled for the first time. "Thank you. This is how I see her, full of grace and light." The next day, Julian invited Anya to his small studio. Alara stayed hidden, watching from a distance. Julian showed Anya the painting, his hands trembling as he spoke. "This is how I see you, Anya," he said softly. "I love you. I don't have money or riches, but I have my heart, and it belongs to you." Anya's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the painting. She turned to Julian and took his hands. "I never wanted riches, Julian," she said. "I wanted someone who could see me, truly see me. And you do. I love you too." Alara felt her heart swell with happiness. Whisper's voice echoed in her mind. "Well done, Alara. You helped love find its way." As Alara prepared to return to her own time, she saw Julian and Anya standing together, their hands clasped. Love had found its place, and Alara knew she had made a difference. Back in her apartment, Alara smiled as she placed the clock on her desk. "Thank you, Whisper," she said. "This journey was magical." "It's not over yet," Whisper replied. "There are many more stories of love waiting for you." Alara nodded, her heart full of hope and wonder. She was ready for the next adventure. Chapter 6: The Dance of Fate. The grand ballroom glimmered with golden light. Chandeliers sparkled above, and the soft sound of violins filled the air. Men in elegant suits and women in flowing dresses danced gracefully across the polished floor. Alara stood at the edge of the room, holding the clock close to her chest. "This is beautiful," she whispered to Whisper. "Yes, it is," the voice replied. "But tonight is about more than beauty. It is about love and fate." Alara saw Julian standing near the entrance, holding a canvas covered with a delicate cloth. He looked nervous but determined. Not far from him, Anya stood with her fiancé, a tall man in an expensive suit. She wore a stunning silver gown, but her eyes looked sad. Alara walked up to Julian. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I think so," Julian said. "But what if she says no? What if she doesn't want to be with me?" Alara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've already shown her how you feel through your art. Trust that she will follow her heart." Julian nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The crowd parted as he approached Anya and her fiancé. Anya turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Julian, what are you doing here?" "I had to come," he said. "Please, just look at this." "Anya," Julian said, his voice steady, "I painted something for you. I want you." Anya turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Julian, what are you doing here?" "I had to come," he said. "Please, just look at this." He pulled the cloth away, revealing the portrait. It showed Anya in motion, her arms outstretched, her dress flowing as if caught in a gentle breeze. The colors danced across the canvas, capturing her grace and spirit. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the painting, their expressions full of awe. Anya's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You see me in a way no one else does." Julian stepped closer. "I love you, Anya. I always have. I know I don't have money or status, but I can give you my heart. That's all I have to offer." Anya looked at her fiancé, then back at Julian. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch the painting. "This is who I am," she said softly, "not the woman in fancy gowns or ballrooms. I am the dancer you see here, and you are the only one who truly understands me." She turned to her fiancé. "I'm sorry, but I cannot marry you." The man frowned but nodded. "If this is what you want, I will not stop you." Anya took Julian's hand. "Dance with me," she said. Julian hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer," he admitted. Anya smiled. "Just follow me." She led him to the center of the ballroom. The violins played a soft waltz, and they began to move together. Julian stumbled at first, but Anya guided him, her movements smooth and confident. Soon, they were gliding across the floor, their smiles full of joy. Alara watched from the side, her heart full. "They were meant to be together," she said. "Yes," Whisper replied. "You didn't change history, Alara. You helped it find its true path." Alara looked down at the clock in her hands. Its crystal glowed softly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Does the clock only help with love?" she asked. "Love is the thread that binds time," Whisper said. "But it is not the only thing the clock can guide. It chooses paths that bring meaning and connection to those who use it." Alara smiled. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. As the waltz ended, the room erupted in applause. Julian and Anya bowed, their faces glowing with happiness. They turned to Alara, and Anya walked over to her. "Thank you," Anya said. "I don't know how you knew, but you brought us together. I will never forget this." Alara shook her head. "You found each other because of your love. I just helped a little." Anya hugged her, then returned to Julian's side. Alara stepped back into the shadows, holding the clock close. The crystal's glow dimmed slightly, as if it, too, was resting. "Are you ready to go back?" Whisper asked. Yes, Alara said, but I will always remember this night. She closed her eyes, and the warm light of the ballroom faded. When she opened them, she was back in her apartment. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on her desk. Alara placed the clock carefully on the desk and sat down. Thank you, Whisper, she said. You're welcome, the voice replied. But there are still more journeys to take, Alara. Are you ready? Alara smiled, her heart full of hope. I'm ready. The clock glowed softly, its gears turning silently, waiting for the next adventure. Chapter 7. The Guardian's Warning. Alara sat at her small desk, the magical clock glowing softly beside her. She opened a notebook and began to write about her recent adventure in Paris. The memory of Julian and Anya's dance brought a smile to her face. You're thinking about the lovers, Whisper said gently. Yes, Alara replied. Helping them made me feel like I'm part of something bigger. Alara, Whisper said, its tone cautious. Someone is here. Alara froze. What do you mean? The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock. But suddenly, the air felt colder. The shadows in the room seemed to grow longer. Alara, Whisper said, its tone cautious. Someone is here. Alara froze. What do you mean? From the corner of the room, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was an old man with a long black coat. His face was pale and lined with age, but his dark eyes were sharp and full of authority. Who are you? Alara asked, standing up quickly. The man raised a hand as if to calm her. Do not be afraid. My name is Silas. I am the guardian of the clock. Alara glanced at the glowing clock. The guardian? What does that mean? Silas took a step closer. His voice was deep and steady. It means I have been watching over the clock for a very long time. It was created with a purpose, and I must ensure it is used correctly. I'm not using it wrongly, Alara said defensively. I'm helping people. Silas nodded. You have good intentions, but you do not understand the clock's true nature. Alara frowned. Then explain it to me. Silas gestured toward the clock. This device is not an ordinary object. It was created to guide love and fate, but it is not limitless. Each time you use it, it loses a small part of its power. If it runs out, the clock will break, and its magic will be lost forever. Alara's eyes widened. I didn't know that. Whisper never told me. I did not know it either, Whisper said softly. I only know what the clock allows me to remember. Silas continued. The clock has rules. You must not use it carelessly. Every time you change something in the past, even for the better, there are consequences. Alara crossed her arms. But I didn't change history. Whisper said I helped it find its true path. That may be true, Silas said, but the clock's power is not infinite. If you continue to use it without thought, you risk destroying it. And if it is destroyed, the lives it has touched may also be affected. Alara sat down, her heart heavy. So what am I supposed to do? Just stop using it? No, Silas said. The clock exists to be used, but you must choose your journeys wisely. Ask yourself if the trip is truly necessary. And remember, the clock's purpose is to guide love, not to solve every problem you encounter. Alara looked at the clock. Its glowing crystal seemed dimmer now, as if it understood the weight of Silas's words. What happens if the clock breaks? She asked. Silas's expression grew serious. If the clock breaks, its connection to time will shatter. Those who have been helped by it may lose their way. And you, Alara, may lose the bond you have formed with it. Alara felt a lump in her throat. She reached out and gently touched the clock. I didn't mean to put it in danger. I just wanted to help. You have a kind heart, Silas said. That is why the clock chose you. But kindness must be balanced with wisdom. Alara nodded slowly. I understand. I'll be more careful. Silas stepped back toward the shadows. Remember, Alara, the clock is not just a tool. It is a responsibility. Treat it with care. As he disappeared into the darkness, the room grew warm again. Whisper spoke softly. He is right, Alara. We must be careful. Alara sat in silence for a long time, staring at the clock. Finally, she spoke. Whisper, do you think the clock chose me for a reason? I believe so, Whisper replied. But only you can decide what that reason is. Alara took a deep breath. Then I'll make sure I use it wisely. The clock's magic is too important to lose. She placed the clock gently back on her desk. Its crystal glowed faintly, as if in agreement. Alara knew that her journey with the clock was far from over, but she also knew that she had to protect it. For now, the clock ticked on, its secrets still waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 8. The Clock's Secret. Alara stood outside the bookstore, pages of yesterday. The warm light from the windows made the dusty shelves and rows of books inside look inviting. Holding the magical clock in her hands, she pushed open the door. Mr. Abernathy was sitting at his desk, reading an old, leather-bound book. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. Ah, Alara. It's good to see you. Alara walked to the counter. Mr. Abernathy, I need to talk to you. It's about this clock. She carefully placed the glowing clock on the counter. Mr. Abernathy's eyes widened. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he let out a soft chuckle. So, you found it. I wondered when this day would come. Alara stared at him, surprised. You know about the clock? Mr. Abernathy nodded. Of course. That clock has been in my family for generations. It's more than just a clock, isn't it? Alara hesitated. It's magical. It lets me travel through time. But there's more, isn't there? Mr. Abernathy smiled gently and gestured for her to sit. Come, my dear. Let me tell you a story. Mr. Abernathy pulled a small, worn journal from a drawer under the counter. The leather cover was cracked with age, and the pages were yellowed. This journal belonged to my grandfather, he began. His name was Henry Abernathy. He was the first in our family to use the clock. Alara leaned forward, curious. What did he do with it? Mr. Abernathy opened the journal to a page filled with neat handwriting. He discovered the clock's power by accident, much like you did. But he quickly realized it wasn't just a tool for time travel. It was a test. A test? Alara repeated. Mr. Abernathy nodded. Yes, a test to see if true love exists and if some people are meant to guide it. The clock chooses its keeper, someone who can use it wisely and protect its magic. Alara thought about her recent journeys. So, it's not just about traveling through time. It's about helping people find love? Exactly, Mr. Abernathy said. But it's not as simple as it seems. The clock doesn't just let you visit the past or the future. It brings you to moments where your actions can make a difference. Moments where love is in danger of being lost. Lara's eyes were fixed on the journal as Mr. Abernathy flipped through its pages. My grandfather wrote about his adventures with the clock, he said. He helped a young woman in Victorian London who was afraid to marry for love instead of duty. He reunited two lovers during the chaos of World War I. Each time, the clock glowed brighter, as if it was pleased. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. But why does the clock do this? Why does it care about love? Mr. Abernathy smiled wistfully. The clock was made by a master craftsman many years ago. He believed that love is the most powerful force in the world. He wanted to prove that love could overcome even the barriers of time. So, he poured his heart and soul into creating this clock. It's not just a machine. It's a symbol of his belief in love. Alara looked at the clock, its crystal glowing softly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Mr. Abernathy agreed. "But remember, the clock's power is not infinite. Every journey uses a little of its magic. That's why it's so important to use it wisely." Alara took a deep breath. "Silas, the guardian, warned me about that. He said the clock could break if I'm not careful." Mr. Abernathy nodded gravely. "Silas is right. If the clock breaks, its magic will be lost forever, and all the love it has guided might be lost too." Alara felt a deep sense of responsibility. "I don't want that to happen. But why did the clock choose me?" Mr. Abernathy's kind eyes met hers. "Because you have a good heart, Alara. You care about people. You want to help them. That's what the clock needs in a keeper." Alara looked down at her hands. "I've already helped a few people, but I'm afraid of making a mistake." "We all make mistakes," Mr. Abernathy said. "Even my grandfather did. But what matters is that you learn from them and continue to do your best." Mr. Abernathy closed the journal and handed it to Alara. "Take this. It might help you understand the clock better." Alara held the journal tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. I'll take good care of it." "I know you will," he said with a smile. "And remember, you're not alone. The clock has whispered to guide you, and you have me if you ever need advice." Alara felt a wave of gratitude. She picked up the clock and the journal and stood. "I should go. There's so much I need to think about." Mr. Abernathy walked her to the door. "Take your time, Alara. The clock will wait for you." Mr. Abernathy walked her to the door. "Take your time, Alara. The clock will wait for you." As Alara stepped out into the quiet street, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't fully understand the clock's magic yet, but she knew one thing. She had been chosen for a reason, and she would do her best to honor that. The clock ticked softly in her hands, as if agreeing with her thoughts. Alara smiled and began to walk home, ready for whatever adventure lay ahead. Chapter 9. The Heart of Time. Alara sat on the soft chair by her window. The clock rested on the small table beside her. Its golden crystal glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The room was quiet, except for the gentle ticking sound. She reached out and touched the clock. A familiar warmth spread through her hand. "Whisper," she said softly. "Are you there?" "I am here," Whisper's voice answered, calm and kind. Alara smiled. "I've learned so much from you and this clock, but I still don't understand everything. Why does it feel like the clock is alive?" Whisper's voice seemed thoughtful. "The clock is not alive like you or me, but it carries something very real. It was created with love, and that love gives it its power. Each time it is used to help someone, that power grows." But, Alara asked, sensing hesitation. "The clock's power is fading," Whisper admitted. "Time travel is not easy. Each journey takes a part of its energy. It can only do so much before it will stop forever." Alara felt her heart sink. She traced the smooth edges of the crystal with her finger. "Can it be fixed? Can it get its power back?" "No," Whisper replied gently, "but that's not a bad thing. The clock was never meant to last forever. It was made to guide, to show people the strength of love, and to inspire them. Once its purpose is fulfilled, it will rest." Alara looked at the glowing crystal. "Whisper, I feel like I was meant to find you, like you were meant to guide me." "I feel the same," Whisper said. Alara, you have shown kindness and courage. You have used the clock not for yourself, but to help others. That is why it chose you. Alara thought about the people she had met on her journeys, her grandmother, Julian, Anya, and even Silas. Each experience had taught her something important about love, bravery, and following her heart. But what about you, Whisper? She asked. Who are you? Why are you bound to this clock? Whisper's voice softened. I was once like you, a keeper of the clock. My heart was full of love and hope. But when my time ended, a part of me stayed with the clock to guide the next keeper. That part of me has been with the clock ever since. Alara's chest tightened. So, you've been helping people for years, maybe even centuries. Yes, Whisper said. And now, it is your turn to look inside your own heart. Alara closed her eyes. My heart? Yes, Whisper said. The clock is not just a tool. It is a reflection of its keeper's deepest wishes. You have used it to help others, but now it is time to ask yourself, what do you truly want? What is the strongest wish in your heart? Alara sat quietly, the question echoing in her mind. She thought of her journeys, the love she had witnessed, and the lessons she had learned. Then she thought of her own life, her quiet days in the bookstore, her longing for connection, and her dream of finding a love that felt as real as the stories she read in books. Alara began, her voice trembling. I want to find love, not in the past or the future, but here, in my own time. I want to share my life with someone who understands me. The clock's crystal glowed brighter, as if it had heard her wish. Tears filled Alara's eyes. But how? How do I find that kind of love? You already have the answer, Whisper said. You have shown kindness, courage, and an open heart. Those are the things that will guide you. The clock has brought you this far, but the rest of the journey is yours to make. Alara looked at the glowing clock. She realized that its heart, the crystal, the gears, the magic was more than just a machine. It was love itself, a reminder of the connections that tied people together across time and space. The glow of the clock softened, and Whisper's voice grew quieter. Alara, my time with you is ending, but your journey is just beginning. Remember what you have learned. Follow your heart, and you will find what you are looking for. Alara felt a tear slide down her cheek. Thank you, Whisper, for everything. The clock's glow faded until it was a soft, golden light. Whisper's voice was gone, but Alara felt its presence in her heart. She stood and placed the clock on her desk. The journey was over, but her life was just beginning. As she looked out the window at the garden below, she felt a sense of hope. The clock had helped her see the truth. Love was not something to chase through time, it was something to create in the present. Alara smiled, her heart full of courage and possibility. She was ready to write her own story, one moment at a time. Chapter 10. The Final Choice. Alara sat in her apartment, staring at the glowing clock. The soft light from the crystal filled the room, casting golden patterns on the walls. She could feel the clock's gentle energy, like a quiet heartbeat. Whisper, Alara called softly. I'm here, Whisper answered, its voice calm but faint. Alara touched the crystal. The clock feels weaker. What's happening? Whisper's voice carried a mix of warmth and sadness. The clock has only one jump left, Alara. Its power is almost gone. Alara felt a lump in her throat. One jump? Just one. Yes, Whisper said. You must decide how to use it. Alara's heart ached. She had relied on the clock and Whisper for guidance, and now she had to make the most important choice of all. What should I do? She asked, her voice trembling. Whisper didn't answer immediately. After a pause, it said, "I cannot tell you what to do. This choice is yours alone." Alara closed her eyes. She thought about all the people she had met during her journeys. She thought about her grandmother's garden, Julian and Anya's love, and the lessons she had learned about courage and connection. "But what happens to you, Whisper?" she asked. "If the clock stops working, will you disappear?" Whisper hesitated. "Yes," it said softly. "When the clock's power is gone, I will fade away. But that is how it was always meant to be. I am part of the clock, and my time is ending." Tears filled Alara's eyes. "That's not fair. You've helped so many people, including me. I don't want to lose you." Alara stared at the glowing crystal. "If I use the last jump, what happens to the clock?" "The clock will fulfill its purpose," Whisper said. "It will bring you to the moment you choose, whether it is in the past, the future, or to someone who can bring you happiness." Alara thought about the possibility. She could use the clock to find the love she had always dreamed of. She could travel to the moment that would change her life forever. But another thought entered her mind. If she used the last jump, Whisper would be gone. The kind voice that had guided her through so much would disappear. "Is there a way to save you, Whisper?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There is," Whisper replied. "If you choose, you can use the last jump to return the clock to its place of origin. That will allow me to rest peacefully and preserve the clock's essence for the future." Alara's heart felt heavy. She understood what she had to do, but it wasn't easy. She had grown attached to Whisper, and the idea of letting it go was painful. "I've always wanted to find love," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't do it by sacrificing you. You've been there for me through everything, Whisper. I can't abandon you now." Whisper's voice was filled with warmth. "Alara, your kindness is your greatest strength. This decision shows the love that is already in your heart." Alara wiped away her tears and took a deep breath. "I choose to save you, Whisper. I'll use the last jump to return the clock to its origin." The crystal glowed brighter, as if the clock understood her choice. Alara stood and placed the clock gently on the table. "What happens now?" she asked. "Close your eyes," Whisper said. "Focus on the clock's origin, on the place where it was created. The clock will take us there." Alara did as Whisper instructed. She placed her hands on the crystal, closed her eyes, and thought about the beginning of the clock's journey. The room filled with golden light. She felt a warm breeze, like the one she had felt when she first discovered the clock. When she opened her eyes, she found herself in a small workshop filled with tools, gears, and crystals. "This is where the clock was made," Whisper said. Its voice was faint but content. Alara placed the clock on a wooden table in the center of the workshop. The crystal glowed brightly for a moment, then dimmed. "Thank you, Alara," Whisper said. "You have given me peace, and you have shown me the beauty of love and sacrifice." Alara felt a tear roll down her cheek. "Thank you, Whisper, for everything." The crystal's light faded completely, and the room grew quiet. Alara stood there for a moment, feeling both sadness and peace. When Alara returned to her apartment, the clock was gone. The table where it had rested was empty, but her heart was full. She sat by the window and looked out at the garden below. The world felt different, brighter. She realized that she didn't need the clock to find love or happiness. Those things were within her, waiting to be discovered. Alara smiled, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life. She had made the right choice, and she knew that Whisper's memory would stay with her forever. Chapter 11. The Clock's Legacy. Alara walked into the bookstore, holding the clock carefully in her hands. The soft tick-tock of the clock was steady and calm, as if it had found peace. She looked around the store, searching for Mr. Abernathy. She had brought the clock back to the place where it had started, the place that had helped her understand its secret. Mr. Abernathy was standing behind a desk, looking through an old book. When he saw Alara, he smiled and waved her over. "You're back," he said. "I see you've brought the clock." Alara nodded. She placed the clock on the table, carefully. "I've done it," she said softly. "I freed the whisper inside the clock." Mr. Abernathy looked at the clock, then back at Alara. "Good," he said. "Now, we must put it back." They both walked to the back of the store, to the hidden compartment in the wall where the clock had first been. Alara placed the clock into the secret space, just as she had done before. As soon as the clock was in place, the compartment began to close. Suddenly, the crystal on the clock glowed. There was a soft light, and a gentle sound filled the room. It was the sound of a whisper. "Alara," the whisper said, "thank you for freeing me." Alara looked at the light, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. She had helped the whisper, but now it was time for it to go. She had helped it find peace. The light slowly faded, and the whisper disappeared. Alara smiled, but a tear fell from her eye. She was happy to have helped, but she would miss the gentle sound of the whisper. Mr. Abernathy stood beside her, watching the light fade away. "The clock is at rest now," he said. "It has fulfilled its purpose." Alara nodded. "And so have I." "You have," Mr. Abernathy replied. "The clock gave you a test, Alara. It tested your ability to understand love and time. You have passed. You have learned the most important lesson." "What lesson?" Alara asked. "The lesson of love," Mr. Abernathy said. "True love is about freedom. It is about helping others find peace, even if it means letting them go. The clock was a gift to you. It showed you that love is not about holding on. It is about letting go and knowing that the people we love will be free." Alara thought about this for a moment. "So the clock's legacy is about love and freedom?" "Yes," Mr. Abernathy said. "And now, you are ready. You are ready to love, truly and deeply." Alara smiled. She felt a warmth in her heart. She had learned so much from the clock, and she was ready for whatever came next. A few months passed, and Alara was sitting at her desk, looking out the window. The air was warm, and the sun was shining brightly. She had opened the window to let in the fresh breeze. Alara smiled as she picked up her pen and began to write in her notebook. She wrote about her adventure with the clock. She wrote about the lessons she had learned, about love and time, and how they were connected. She wrote about how helping others and setting them free had taught her about the nature of true love. She had learned that love was not just about holding on to someone. It was also about giving them the freedom to be themselves. As Alara finished writing, she felt a sense of peace. She had written the final words of her story, and it felt like the end of a chapter. But as she closed the notebook, she heard a knock on the door. Alara stood up and opened the door. Standing there was a man she had never seen before. He had a warm smile, and his eyes sparkled in a way that reminded Alara of someone she knew well. "Hello," the man said. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Lucas. I've heard so much about you, and I wanted to meet you." Alara felt a strange sense of recognition. It was as if this was the beginning of something new. She smiled, a little nervous but happy. "Hello, Lucas," she said. "It's nice to meet you." As she spoke, Alara realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a chapter about love and the future. And so, with a sense of hope and excitement, Alara stepped into a new journey, ready to see what love would bring.